I'm an only child, my parents were able to sort of bring me lots of places, and I say that because I had a perspective of seeing the world, but I also had a really great appreciation of America growing up because I'm descended from someone that came over on the Mayflower, so I was always taught, like, we're patriotic, we love our country, but we also have an appreciation for cultures everywhere. I was a competitive figure skater, so I was very dedicated to something. I went to church regularly on the weekends, so very kind of standard, I'd say traditional. We weren't a very political household, but I'd say, you know, family values-wise, we were more conservative, but again, very open-minded, just treat people how you wanted to be treated. Kind of simple, standard stuff, you would think. I graduated from a prep school in Florida called St. Andrews in Boca in 2011. In the fall of 2011 is when I entered Mount Holyoke College. Mount Holyoke is the oldest women's college in the country. It was founded in 1837. The reason I wanted to go there is it's incredibly academic. It's the first of the 7 sisters. So a lot of people are familiar with Wellesley. Hillary Clinton went there. Mount Holyoke was the first one, and Wellesley was actually modeled after Mount Holyoke. And I knew I wanted to be somewhere that was very quintessential New England college experience. So that's how I landed there. You know, right upon entering campus, it was kind of culture shock. A lot of the students had shaved heads, they dressed like boys, and I, you know, was 18, I was like, okay, whatever, this is cool, I have an open mind. I was told, you know, we don't call ourselves freshmen, we call ourselves first years. So immediately, gender's kind of being taken out of everything, which is odd, because we are a women's college, meant to be very proud of our womanhood, but all of a sudden it's, you know, I'm being handed a little pamphlet that says, you know, don't assume someone's gender, he may be she may be they, and so and so. And again, this is 2011, this isn't in the mainstream yet. So I'm entering campus and I'm like, this is wacky, but we're just gonna roll with it. You know, my sophomore year was the Obama-Romney election. That was the first time, so I voted for Mitt Romney in that election. I remember telling some of my peers, and that was the first time I really felt shamed and kind of canceled, and basically any kind of Republican idea was beaten out of me, and I folded, right? You know, I didn't have the conviction that I do now to really understand maybe why I was voting for him. It's just kind of what I thought we did. But everyone around me was saying how evil he was and how he's sexist and this, and you have to vote for Obama, if you don't, you're racist. Of course I don't want to be a racist. I'm like, okay, I made a mistake. Come my junior year is when things for me really shifted. My whole outlook on life changed. I started to take higher level courses. I studied history and politics, so an example of some of my classes were among, you know, I took a gender studies class, but I also took race, gender, and empire, and so that's about colonies throughout the world, and it painted this picture of the evil colonizer, how Columbus was a genocidal maniac, and all of a sudden these ideas are being put into my head that, wow, America is actually so evil. Our roots are evil. You know, in gender studies, I was taught about the invisible, but the systematic patriarchal oppression that we were founded on and that I have experienced my entire life, right? So it's almost as if I'm being taught something I've never known, and they're giving me an answer to any problem I've ever faced. Oh, I didn't do well on that essay. It must be because the teacher's a man and he is a sexist because we live in a patriarchy. So these ideas are being programmed into me. Keep in mind college culture, you know, I'd said I'd grown up going to church. I very quickly turned from that because there wasn't really room on campus, I felt. You know, I stopped believing in anything. I took a lot of science classes. I think that there's a big party culture on campus because on all campuses in America. And I think that is also hurt me because my judgment was clouded. You know, like I said, I took science classes. I took an environmental science class. So now I'm being told about the destruction that humans have done on society and on the earth, and how, you know, our time here is very finite and that we're burning everything down. And again, back to like the evil Republicans, because everything always came back to that, right? And at my school, all my teachers, my professors had Ivy League degrees. So I listened to them when they're telling me that the earth is going to end in 12 years if we don't do something mean, I'm gonna take on that burden and be like, I can never use a paper towel again. And so now I am burdened with this, okay, the world's ending. I am a victim of sexism all the time. I didn't even know this, and that means my mother and my grandmother, and my dad's a part of it, unknowingly participant. He's benefited from the system. Another thing the school did was we were given all the texts that we read had this very Marxist, liberal lean. I didn't understand that at the time. Right now I do, but looking back, one of the books that was really pivotal was this story of this woman who was a transgender man, and as soon as she transitioned into being a man, men treated her differently. She was included as one of the boys, so it really reinforced this idea of like the evil male and the evil white male who founded this country. So I graduated in 2015, and I was just so distraught. I was very anxious. I was very depressed. I was overwhelmed. I think that a lot of people in my year and now young Americans are going through that, right? Because they have the burden of all these atrocities in America that, at the time I didn't realize it's fake, it's made up. I'm not a victim for being a woman. It's such a gift, but skipping ahead a little. I ended up working on the Hillary Clinton campaign. The poll, of course, was the symbolism of her being a female, and as soon as she lost, I was hysterical. I felt like the country told me women didn't matter. Meanwhile, my mom was making calls for Donald Trump. So she was helping his campaign. And I know, it's funny. But to me, that was so earth-shattering, right? I was like, how could a woman who raised another woman want to help that man, and not even about him? It was more, how could you not want to help this symbol, right? This like beacon of light and hope, Hillary Clinton, who's going to change everything for women in America. And I would go home to my family and I would fight with them and I would say, you don't understand, and they would come back at me and they'd be like, what don't you have? What opportunity don't you have? And I'd make up a scenario in my head, right? Because my thinking was shifted so that I was able to look at every instance as if there was some inherent bias against me as a woman, or I had to deconstruct my own bias towards others. Oh, do I not like that person's shirt? Oh no, are they a person of color? Like I have to be worried that I'm going to offend them, or that's ingrained in me. Keep in mind, I said that I've lived all over. I lived in the Bahamas. There were many times where I was a minority, and it didn't matter. The culture there was just different. It wasn't so prevalent. So 2015, 2016 was kind of the peak of me being a mess with all these ideas, fighting with my family. Simultaneously, my mom starts calling cult deprogrammers because that's how I was acting. She said I was like a socialist robot. And I was
sounds like it is.
But she's not wrong. I mean, I had all these sound bites that I would get from Rachel Maddow or the New York Times, not really understanding, right? And I felt like I was very educated, so how could I possibly wrong? And I went to this fancy school, and I went on and I got a master's, so it was very hard to kind of reason with me. And I ended up moving to New York City for a bit. 2018 brought me back down to Florida so that I could work on the Andrew Gillum campaign. If you guys remember that. Thank God, fortunately he didn't win. But that is just an idea of how, I had a job actually on Wall Street while I was in New York, and I ended up leaving that job to come down here specifically to work for Andrew Gillum because I thought that it was kind of my sense of duty as maybe someone who was privileged, and I needed to come help this candidate. And he was so progressive, if you guys remember. He was as far left as it gets. Fortunately that campaign ended how it did. And even amidst all the chaos and the scandal of him in the aftermath, I still felt like, yeah, but I think his policies help people. I think he had the right idea. Really, fast forward, it wasn't until 2020, and it was kind of a perfect storm of events. So at this point in 2020, graduated in 2015, I'd spent the last years, even though I had jobs and was doing well, I felt very lost, right? I clung to these ideologies and this leftism and this Marxism, and I argued with people, I lost friendships, I fought with my family, and I really didn't even understand why. So I made some lifestyle changes and I stopped drinking completely, and I had a clear, sober mind. in that sober mind, you know, I reconnected with God. I had had God in my life before going to school. Took years of being away from Him, but I finally found my way back. And so I had again that kind of inner peace that had been, I mean, robbed from me. And in 2020, during the lockdowns, I was in Palm Beach in my apartment. I remember looking on social media, and again, finally, I'm sober-minded and I believe in God. I'm still like Democrat, whatever, but I'm not as obsessive. And I'm looking at the riots, and I'm seeing everyone with a black square, everyone saying no justice, no peace. These videos of people burning down businesses, saying it's in the name of empowerment. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, my friends, they all live in Boston or they work in New York City. They are so removed from this. Like, how is burning down businesses helping people? How is this helping people? And I just remember being like, this doesn't make sense. In that moment, a PragerU video came onto my newsfeed. And this video, I have chills even just thinking about it. This video was called, Are the Police Racist? And I remember I clicked on it because it was a question. So I didn't know what PragerU was, it could go either way. And I watched this video, and in the first 30 seconds, it's a moderator named Heather McDonald, and she goes on to, very calmly with facts, just explain how it's not true that white cops are disproportionately killing unarmed black men. And just gave facts. And that was the first kind of, okay, I think I'm being lied to. And then from there, I just went down the rabbit hole and I started looking at other conservative outlets and basically unlearning everything I learned in school, reteaching myself, which was basically the foundation I'd already had that had somehow been totally taken from me, relearning the truth, seeking the truth, and also, you know, even talking to people in Florida, talking to young people, realizing that people that were happy, that had jobs, that were good members of society, they all actually believed in conservative values, but they never said anything to me because they couldn't, because I would have shut them down, I would have judged them. So now, you know, fast forward, I had the opportunity to join the PragerU development team, and it's absolutely a God moment. I happened to go to an event and I met the CFO, and then a couple months later they called me and they said, you know, would you join our team? And I didn't even have to think about it. I said, of course, because PragerU was so pivotal, so instrumental in my seeing the light and seeking the truth again. So that is, I mean, that's my story. That's why I'm here tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions and tell you a bit more about PragerU, but that's the Annabella part of it, so thank you.
Now that was such a great story. It's so interesting when you go back to your family, and you go back, and that's what they want to break to, as we know, the family.
Yeah.
And you're going back after studying, you know, and you're in an argument, and you're unhappy and uncomfortable back with your family. I just hate it so much. And, you know, I understand. I also know why Inez said, well, I said, what do you want for your birthday? She said, I want you to give to PragerU.
Oh, thank you.
That's so cool. I love the story. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much.
So you said you went to an all-girls school. I have a niece. Unfortunately, she's still kind of on that very destructive path, I think. Besides sexism, what else? You know, nowadays there's the shame, the white privilege. For me personally, I don't think the privilege is not the bad word. I think entitlement. And entitlement goes across all race, ethnicities, genders, age, whatever. So besides the sexism part, what else did you face? Was it that you were white, and also was it not only the sexism, but I'll let you answer that. You know, what else did you face?
Thank you, it's a good question. So, you know, the environment, sexism, also just full picture identity crisis, right? You are really told to try everything, explore everything. So all of a sudden you're being told sexuality is a spectrum. Well, maybe I should push myself to be with someone of the same sex. I mean, that was really, really normalized. Also that word normalize, like let's normalize everything. Let's normalize being obese. Let's normalize having 5 partners at once. Kind of being pushed as far as you can possibly take it. So I hit a point where, I mean, all these identities are being questioned, and you hit a point of being like, well, I don't even know who I am, but simultaneously, you're being labeled, okay, well, woman, and okay, well, maybe you're bisexual because you didn't like that one boy. Like that's definitely the answer. It's just, you know, I laugh, but it's not. It's true. You're told gender's a spectrum. Fortunately, that was not anything I ever questioned myself. However, my peers, I mean, I was on a sports team. I played ice hockey, and our goalie was a transgender man. You know, I was taught what a dead name was because he had legally changed his name to this new name, and the person he was before just didn't exist anymore. You know, there was no record of this person. This person was dead, essentially. You know, and she had all the surgeries, was taking testosterone, had facial hair. So I was really conditioned to not make any assumptions either about anyone. But at the same time, this gender ideology is so, you know, women are hyper feminized and trans men are uber masculine. So it's hypocritical, but it's hard to see it when you're so in it.
And if I may, just one more follow-up to
Yeah.
that. You know, what is the definition nowadays at school like that for feminism? It's almost as if they're going it's against that, because I thought feminism is celebrating being a woman and being strong as a woman. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
So now the push is you have to be like all-inclusive feminism, right? So women is now an encompassing term of whoever feels like they're a woman, and if you don't accept that, then you are the enemy. And we actually, Mount Holyoke was the first women's college while I was there to change the admissions policy to let women on admittance in, so you could be a biological male identifying as a woman and go to the women's college and take a spot away from an actual woman.
Yeah.
What did you do your master's in, and where did you get your master's?
So I went to Spain and I got my MBA in international business.
Did you get a different education there?
So it's funny, one of the reasons I went to Spain is because and it was an amazing opportunity, but I was really unhappy in America. I really just thought that America was the root of my problem. I went to Spain, turns out I was just the root of my problem, and I still wasn't super happy over there. But I was glad that I had that different perspective, but Spain is such a traditional country that I think it kind of it enraged me a little bit because it was 2016, so it was while the Clinton-Trump election happened. Well, I guess it was still the primaries, but a lot of my focus was still on that. So it was hard to even be present while being in Europe because I was so consumed with
What city?
Barcelona. Yeah, which is amazing.
Okay, so my question is, how would you talk to yourself in the past without seeing that video of our police racist?
That's a good question. I would start with challenges of, well, why do you think that? Right? Because when someone is indoctrinated, it's going to come out really quickly. I'm sure everyone's experienced this. If someone is a leftist, you will know within the first 30 seconds of speaking to them. So it's sort of picking away a little bit at it, but then also just being an example of someone that doesn't bring in ideologies into every conversation. I think that sets an example, but it's another question you can ask someone is there anything on this issue that you're skeptical about? Like, is there any way that I could change your mind? Is there anything I could say that would change your mind? And that gives people a moment to think, well, maybe they're not 100% convinced that we're totally racist, right? Or totally X, Y, Z. It could be anything,
Yeah.
right? So asking questions. And people really, the red pill moment, I think, is when you realize that you've been lied to about something. So, you know, not just giving the truth, but challenging a lie that somebody already knows. So it has to, I think it helps when it's maybe kind of specific. Like I had this idea of 1950s housewives as being like really depressed and addicted to drugs and not able to have credit cards. And I had this, you know, so someone had to tell me like, that's not not the case. Here, look at this study, and very calmly deliver me some truth.
So having clear facts and
Yeah, and also challenge the person to back up their beliefs with clear facts, because normally they can't.
yeah.
And also staying calm, because when someone is going through this crisis, right, because it is an internal crisis where you realize, well, you're so emotionally invested in this idea, and if all of a sudden it might not be true, the person you're speaking to, like, they kind of need to be a place of comfort, right? Like, if I'm so upset and you're screaming at me, I told you so, that's also not the answer. That's not going to bring someone over. Like, they need to see that that things are actually better, that things aren't so bad. Marxism isn't the answer. Socialism isn't the answer. Capitalism works. Let me tell you why. Let's go get a coffee.
I'm shocked that in 2011 they were talking about pronouns.
Yeah.
Was that happening in all universities or?
I think it started probably in the New England ones and then spread out. So I think what we're seeing. So my instance is that my school was particularly ahead of the curve. I can only imagine what it's like on campus now. But I was told, so a few things. One, go home and fight your family at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Just assume your uncle is a racist and you need to put him in his place. It's your responsibility. So we're given that, and then also that it is now our duty to go into the workforce and change things from the inside out. So I think that's why you see all these companies going woke. It's because they have graduates, millennials, that were brainwashed in college, and they're going into the workforce, and they're changing all the policies, and they're making everything about identity, and not about the customer, and not about products. It's all identity, wokeism, nonsense, politics, not even politics, social ideology. But that is coming from the colleges, and now, of course, the teachers, it's trickled down. It's in all the schools. It's very hard to avoid. I think as a parent, you have to be really attentive of everything your child is being given. Myself today, would I go to school? I don't know. Or would I go to college? And I've come from a family, I had grandparents and great-grandparents that went to Yale. Like, it's just something that we do, and now we're at a point where, well, I would certainly never trust someone right now that goes to Yale. Like, nothing they're just because I know that they're being brainwashed. And they get this degree and they're really entitled. You said the word entitlement. We have a huge entitlement issue. I had to really humble myself to admit that I was wrong. I mean, like, just peel back every layer and be like, okay, let's restart this. And so it's a process. And one of the cult deprogrammers that my mom consulted said, very interesting statistic, it's about a 7-year process when someone's brainwashed. And so now that you know this, you'll see when you hear red pill stories, you'll hear people give about a 5 to 7 year timeline of the whole, like, oh, well, maybe they started to transition, they lived as the opposite sex, and then a few years later they came out of it. That's kind of the timeline, and also more women than men can come out of it, can come out of being brainwashed. And also, me personally, I say don't affirm. Like, so speaking to parents or friends of someone they're concerned about, when someone comes to you all of a sudden, they've been one way their entire life. So for me, I was, myself going into college, and then all of a sudden I come back and I'm argumentative and I have all these new identities and labels, and I'm expecting everyone to just accept them. My family didn't, and I think that's the best thing they could have done for me. I think that you should not affirm someone when all of a sudden they change and they're already like a formed human. Like, there's something deeper going on, right? So affirmation is the empathetic route. Of course, if someone comes to you and they're like, I'm really lost, I think, I think I'm a guy. It's hard to say, no, you're not, right? It takes some strength to tell someone the truth. You kind of have to be like, well, why do you feel this way? Why don't we look at X, Y, Z? And instead, we're giving people drugs. We are putting people under the knife. And it's all from this idea of, like, let's just be empathetic. No, empathy is not the truth. The truth is, the born one way, let's figure out what's wrong with you. You know, it's a very, very small percent of the population that actually has gender dysphoria as a mental illness.
And, you know, hypocrisy is a really good word to use on many of these topics. In terms of identification, identifying, there have been memes on Facebook, social media, and I definitely don't want to make fun because I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but when I use this example, it really does bring about hypocrisy. I saw a documentary of a woman who identified, she was a white woman that identified as a black woman. And there was a lot of backlash, and I understood that backlash because, you know, how can you identify that? And I never realized some of the stories from the black women talking about growing up and having to deal with certain things and issues that this woman just all of a sudden decides she's going to identify. Using that as an example, and I absolutely respected the black women that were speaking because, you know, I thought, my goodness, how could this woman like just all of a sudden identify? It's one thing to appreciate the culture and the beauty and want to be a part of it. Why not?
Well, if you appreciate, then you're appropriating. So
Right.
you're actually not allowed to appreciate.
So why is it not okay for that, but it's certainly okay to identify as a totally different gender? So I'm just bringing that up from like a hypocrisy standpoint.
Yeah.
Just pick and choose. Well, you can't have it all. You accept one thing, you gotta accept the other. So yeah.
I guess sex is okay, but race is not okay. You cannot pretend to be somebody
No,
else.
I don't think
Race or ethnic
I wanted
group.
to be a black
What?
lesbian woman.
You'd probably be given a CEO position somewhere.
I know, right? I could change jobs like
I
right
mean,
now.
I think, yeah, it just speaks to the hypocrisy. Really, more
Yeah.
than-
I have a question. If you had any, do you think there are specific topics? I mean, I know it all depends on the person you're speaking to, but I know a lot of leftists. Like, I deal with them like I'm involved.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
work
you're
in
former
fashion
scholar,
designer,
yeah.
and I work in ballet, so
Yeah.
it's like literally
Ballet
everyone I know.
dancer,
But
fashion
I
designer.
don't necessarily believe that all of them believe it. Maybe they do, but I am willing to like stick my neck out a little bit and not push back, but like offer another way. And do you think that there are some opening topics that are, I mean, it just has to be something that happens organically and stuff like that, but like what's an easier red pill, I guess?
So it's definitely specific. For me, police brutality just happened to be like what was going on at the time, the riots, right? So that's kind of an easy one if there's something like really specific being talked about. Like, okay, the Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney scandal that happened 2 weeks ago, I'd say that's a good opportunity to have a conversation with someone, you know, well, what does it mean to be a woman? Like, why should he have been given this sponsorship instead of someone else? I think in your situation where you're in the fashion industry and you're with someone every day, I would maybe go the angle of more pro-America, right? And appreciation for this country, and the juxtaposition being, you know, the sweatshops in Asia that create the clothing that you wear in the fast fashion brands, and how we're so lucky here, right? And maybe just positive and like little things like that. Yeah.
One thing on the fashion industry people don't know, you can say made in France and it actually is made in France by French people, but if you say made in Italy, it is made in Italy, but mostly by Asians that are brought over from the Wuhan area, and that is a big reason why Milan had the outbreak of COVID earlier. And they're just not getting paid real wages, and it's like, it's slavery.
Yeah. Yeah. I think highlighting that specifically with people, you know, and just bringing it back again to gratitude for what we have and the values we are founded on.
So you mentioned like coming from an America First kind of, perspective, right? There's a bill that the Senate just passed, it's 1355 for Floridians here. It's about banning people from 7 countries who are related to the government entity from owning farmland and strategic land near our infrastructure, important infrastructure. And A lot of Asians don't think that way because they're mostly, they're mostly left wing, very, very much so. So they're calling this bill racist. They're saying we're going back to the, I don't know if you know, 2018, there was something, the Asian, what is it, the Asian Exclusion Act, which bans Asian Americans from purchasing land in America. It was in our Florida Constitution, and it was taken out in 2018. We were the last state to take that out. So everybody thinks it's like the Chinese Exclusion Act 2.0, because there is an exact clause that says if you are a citizen of the People's Republic of China, you're not allowed to own residence, period. So now all the residents who own homes here and maybe have a green card but not quite a citizenship yet, they're all freaking out, and like it's becoming a huge thing. So like that, like you know what I mean? Like I'm standing from a point of like, let's alter that. If they're going to talk about people who are going to be banned from owning homes, let's make it clear that they have to be government related or some part of the government. If it's an entity, but if it's a private citizen who wants to own a home, and there are loads of Chinese people from mainland China purchasing land here in Orlando, in Florida, period. So it's like, it's really tough. I'm trying to find my way around, to talk to them and red pill a bit, look, America, right? Like, let's go America first.
I think part of it is a language issue within politics, right? I don't know that much about the bill that's brought forth, so bear with me, but if you compare it to the Don't Say Gay bill that came out in Florida a few months ago, I had a couple of people come to me and say, Florida is so homophobic. And I read the bill, and it's about one page, and I sent it to people, and I said, like, where in this bill does it say don't say gay? That was just, the media spinning things. So I think that in that specific instance, maybe a little bit of research on your part to be like, well, what they're saying isn't actually the case. It's not just Chinese American citizens, it's family members of
the
government
Communist
officials.
Party.
And I would also say just, I don't know the Chinese laws, but I mean, is there a law over there that mirrors our law here?
Oh, nobody, if you're not a Chinese citizen, you cannot buy land, period.
There you go, that's what I would lead with.
No, but that's not, that's what most people are saying, oh, that's not what America stands for, right? Like, we are a land of opportunity, but not for, socialists, Marxists, communists.
Number one
people.
enemy of America.
Exactly.
Period.
Annabella, the bill Don't Say Gay.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at the bill, and nowhere in the bill it says gay.
Yeah.
So actually, the bill doesn't say gay.
So we haven't said gay. That's very true.
I want to weave in PragerU a little bit just as a resource. So if you go into PragerU.com, there is a search bar on the top right-hand side where you can type in kind of any topic. So it can be communism, it can be China, it can be sexism, it can be transgender ideology, anything.
Social issues,
Yeah, social issues,
anything.
environmental, business.
economics, anything.
We even have things for kids, financial literacy courses. We have launched PragerU Kids, which is
That's all
great.
children,
Yeah.
that's all children section.
It's just, yeah.
There's a whole
Yeah.
section.
That's the best news of the whole week.
I think they're really good conversation starters. Most of the we're known for our 5-minute videos. Everything we do is pretty short because we also know we can't keep people's attention for very long, and we use snippets. And what's encouraging is about 25 to 30% of our viewership is unaffiliated or center left. So we are reaching the other side. Like my former self, I had never heard of PragerU. I was in a leftist echo chamber, and the algorithm broke through because we are a nonprofit, so we don't have a paywall, so we are able to reach a lot of people, and we figured out that the internet's the way to do it.
We have a few videos that we're going to show. Luigi? Just to give you some example.
Does anyone have any other questions as well?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What was like the population of this college that you went to? How many students were there?
2,200 undergrad.
Okay, and so when you were getting like indoctrinated, were there other people around you that had a similar background as you, like came from a conservative family? Like,
a lot of the international students were kind of like not involved, right? But if you wanted to like have a social life, you really needed to be a social justice activist. So I became one. I think it speaks to if your kid is in a situation where they're being taught these ideas and there's no room for pushback,
Annabella, you wanna,
I think you take them out. Yeah, you transfer.
Annabella, you wanna come
Why are
here?
you
Come on.
What is
This is a very good one. Where's the,
Sorry, say that again.
What is it about Spain that aggravated you? That you said the conservative.
The like machismo culture,
Oh, the
and also the the presence of God. It was a very Christian country, and at the time, that upset me too. I mean, I love the actual city, right? Barcelona is beautiful. I have an appreciation, but like, I still have that kind of obsession with,
All your traditions, everything you've grown up with.
yeah, that is bad.
Really?
Yeah.
okay, ready? It's 5 minutes, so, but this is a good one. I don't know if you've seen this one, Annabella.
I know him. He works for PragerU now. Also,
Listen, could you raise the volume?
One by one, I
we can
intentionally
just give a
advanced
snippet.
the
It doesn't have
entire
to be the
narrative
whole.
that I was indoctrinated with, or in other words, I accidentally red-pilled myself. My name is Xavier DeRusso, and this is my story. So I was born in one of the roughest neighborhoods of Southside Chicago. I always describe it as like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but backwards, where my eldest brother got in trouble, so my mom got scared and got our whole family together, and we moved to the middle of nowhere cornfields in central Illinois. At the time, it was roughly 90–95% white. So it was a big culture shock for my family, but I'm grateful that I grew up there because there were great schools, there was low crime, but instead of being taught to appreciate that, I was always told to hyper-focus on the difference between myself as a black kid versus all the white kids around me. My mom, she didn't grow up around white people, so when she would tell me things like, oh, you need to be careful, if things hit the fan, then they're just gonna view you as that black guy, he did it. It wasn't out of hate, it was out of her genuinely trying to protect me. My dad, on the other hand, was a bit more radical in his beliefs on race. He was often very spiteful towards white people and often telling me things that I needed to be protected from white people. Certain people in my family would say that white people were always out to get me. That message had a big impact on my self-image. I felt like it was very difficult for me to figure out who I was as a person. I felt like I was too black to be around the white kids, and then I would spend my summers or weekends in Chicago, and it was like I was too white for the black kids. I would be made fun of for the way I spoke or my upbringing. They would say I was talking or acting white. So the older I got, the more I felt like I needed to root my entire identity in my skin color. I wanted to be around more culture because at this point I was truly in this belief that my skin color was always going to be everything. So I wanted to be around liberals and diversity and inclusion. So I moved to California. At that point in my life, I was very angry and I was very lost because I didn't know who I was. So between 2018 to 2020, I was just social media advocating for BLM, trying to raise awareness and teach other people why being more woke was essential for the community. By 2020, that's when things started to definitely take a turn. I was bored during the pandemic and I applied to be on this really popular reality show where I was typecast as a virtual BLM activist, where I taught people how to be an ally and an advocate for BLM. That was right after everything happened with George Floyd. And marching for George Floyd was actually the first time I started to see behind the curtain of what BLM actually was. One of the first things that alarmed me about the BLM protests were, of course, the looting and the rioting. I was always against that. I didn't understand the premise of it. I didn't understand the reasoning for it. And it just seemed so hateful and violent and like it was against everything that MLK stood for. And I would ask people questions of, why are there people destroying black communities in the name of black civil rights justice? But no one wanted to have that conversation. So I started becoming more open-minded to looking at counter arguments and looking at alternative content that opposed the BLM beliefs. And I accidentally stumbled upon a Candace Owens video that made me so unbelievably, ridiculously mad because she was right. That's when things started to definitely take a turn. So in spite of her, I decided I was going to become a pro debater. And that's when I found more of PragerU's videos. And I started listing out different videos, different talking points, topics from PragerU videos, and I planned in my mind that I was going to make a series debunking PragerU videos. And one by one, I unintentionally dismantled the entire narrative that I was indoctrinated with. Or in other words, I accidentally red-pilled myself. People always ask me, what was your red pill moment? For me, it was like an entire prescription pill bottle of red pills, because just over and over, I was like, well, don't believe that anymore, don't believe that anymore. I would say it started with learning just how fraudulent the statistics were about police brutality. I was under this impression that Black people were just being hunted down every single day by police officers. And I ended up learning that it was a very small, minute amount of unarmed Black people who were being shot and killed by police. And when I'm around police officers, I feel so safe. Police officers love me because I mind my business. I don't break the law. I don't have to worry about the police officers targeting me, because that's not what they're here to do. Yes, here and there might be a bad police officer, and those are the people who do need to be held accountable. But the majority of people who become police officers are doing so because they're so passionate about protecting people, about empowering the community. So why would we remove these people and defund them when they're the ones that we call when we need help the most? And why aren't we talking about the selectivity and Black Lives That Matter? Because nobody ever wanted to have the discussion of Black on Black crimes. And that was a problem that nobody had any proper answers for me about, other than to say, oh, you can't talk about Black on Black crime, it's just crime. But if we're going to talk about Black death, let's talk about where most of it is coming from. It's coming from murder, and it's coming from abortion. So it was around October of 2020 where I was still in the process, days before flying out for this reality show, to be a BLM activist, and I finally just backed out. I couldn't do it. I knew that it wasn't what I believed in, and I just couldn't go out there and portray this lie. So when I jumped into the conservative movement, I expected a lot of people to turn their backs on me, and quite a few people did. And when people ask me, did you lose friends? I don't consider those friends that I lost, because a real true friend wouldn't care that you have slightly different ideologies. As long as your core values align, then why does who you vote for matter? I've had people as close as my own sibling turn their back on me because of my ideologies. We do not need to be attached to any parties, any ideology. We just need to be attached to the truth. Sometimes when I try to explain to people why I don't support BLM, and I show them the facts, and I show them statistics, they try to tell me that that is just me being brainwashed and that I'm looking away from the bigger picture. But no, like, that is the entirety of the picture. Facts and stats do not care about your skin color. It's not racist to tell the truth. The focus on skin color to me is just so outdated, and it's just honestly tragic to me that people still think that it's so important. Every nation that you look at has injustices in their history. But when I look at America, I feel like we should feel privileged that we can look at our history and recognize, wow, like, our country actually did something to right our wrongs and to right our injustices. And we are now the most progressive country in the world. But unfortunately, in many ways, we've overcorrected, because now people feel the need to critically find racism in everything. The Black community is not systemically oppressed. We are systemically depressed, and we're not prioritizing the principles that need to be put into the Black family household. Black people really do lean into pop culture a lot. It's a huge aspect of our community. That's why I think it's important for us to talk about culture and not just policy, because culture is often what influences policy and influences the way that we vote. So we do need to pay closer attention to who it is that we have on our screens, what we have in our headphones, and who we're listening to. We need to listen to positivity, to things that motivate us, to things that make us want to be better as a community. The left had this history of making the Black community dependent on them and making the Black community just mentally enslaved for so many years. I knew that I had to speak up about it. I'm much happier as a Black conservative. Someone once told me that I look like I've been so relieved and like there's so much less stress in my life now that I'm a conservative. And it's the truth. And if you are someone who speaks a certain way, you speak too intelligently for the people around you, don't allow people telling you that talking white is a bad thing. There's no such thing as talking white. That's a reflection of their own insecurities and their own ignorance. If you know what it is that you stand firm on, that is the most beautiful thing in the world. You have to lean into your own core values. And if people criticize you, just know that your integrity and the message that you are trying to live out is so much more important than any pushback that you're ever going to get. And I would rather know that I'm standing on values and truth than knowing that I'm just going along with the narrative that people so badly want me to believe in. Don't let someone tell you that because you're black, that this is what you can and cannot do. You have so much more potential in yourself than what the media wants you to believe. It's like this crutch of racism that you never actually needed. We don't need to be put into this little category of this is how black people need to think. Our ancestors fought so that we didn't have to stay in that box. So why would we do them an injustice by continuing to allow ourselves to be mentally oppressed? We are so much better than that as a community. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible
There's one
donation.
other video that I like to play because it's a video that I use a lot with my known life Democrats. Because most Democrats don't know any of the history of their own party. And do the video, the first one. Yeah.
I can let you put a video on for them.
When you think about racial equality and
Oh,
civil
I
rights,
have one
which
that's coming out in
political party
June.
comes
Yeah, end of June. You should show it.
What was the gentleman's name?
Xavier DeRusso. And before we start this, I do want to point out, I think that police brutality, it holds with people because there are actual statistics, and it's really easy to find them. I don't have them off the top of my head, I should. But he's great. I'm working on fundraising for a mini documentary for him about black on black crime and police brutality, specifically to spread awareness, and it's gonna take place in Chicago. So.
Okay, so.
when you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party comes to mind? The Republicans or the Democrats? Most people would probably say the Democrats, but this answer is incorrect. Since its founding in 1829, the Democratic Party has fought against every major civil rights initiative and has a long history of discrimination. The Democratic Party defended slavery, started the Civil War, opposed Reconstruction, founded the Ku Klux Klan, imposed segregation, perpetrated lynchings, and fought against the Civil Rights Acts of the 1950s and 1960s. In contrast, the Republican Party was founded in 1854 as an anti-slavery party. Its mission was to stop the spread of slavery into the new Western territories with the aim of abolishing it entirely. This effort, however, was dealt a major blow by the Supreme Court in the 1857 case, Dred Scott versus Sandford. The court ruled that slaves aren't citizens, they're property. The 7 justices who voted in favor of slavery, all Democrats. The 2 justices who dissented, both Republicans. The slavery question was, of course, ultimately resolved by a bloody civil war. The commander-in-chief during that war was the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, the man who freed the slaves. 6 days after the Confederate Army surrendered, John Wilkes Booth, a Democrat, assassinated President Lincoln. Lincoln's vice president, a Democrat named Andrew Johnson, assumed the presidency. But Johnson adamantly opposed Lincoln's plan to integrate the newly freed slaves into the South's economic and social order. Johnson and the Democratic Party were unified in their opposition to the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which gave blacks citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, which gave blacks the vote. All 3 passed only because of universal Republican support. During the era of Reconstruction, federal troops stationed in the South helped secure rights for the newly freed slaves. Hundreds of black men were elected to Southern state legislatures as Republicans, and 22 black Republicans served in the U.S. Congress by 1900. The Democrats did not elect a black man to Congress until 1935. But after Reconstruction ended, when the federal troops went home, Democrats roared back into power in the South. They quickly reestablished white supremacy across the region with measures like black codes, laws that restricted the ability of blacks to own property and run businesses, and they imposed poll taxes and literacy tests used to subvert black citizens' right to vote. And how was all of this enforced? By terror, much of it instigated by the Ku Klux Klan, founded by a Democrat, Nathan Bedford Forrest. As historian Eric Foner, himself a Democrat, notes, in effect, the Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party. President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, shared many views with the Klan. He resegregated many federal agencies and even screened the first movie ever played at the White House, the racist film, The Birth of a Nation, originally entitled The Klansman. A few decades later, the only serious congressional opposition to the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 came from Democrats. 80% of Republicans in Congress supported the bill, less than 70% of Democrats did. Democratic senators filibustered the bill for 75 days until Republicans mustered the few extra votes needed to break the logjam. And when all of their efforts to enslave blacks, keep them enslaved, and then keep them from voting had failed, the Democrats came up with a new strategy. If black people are going to vote, they might as well vote for Democrats. As President Lyndon Johnson was purported to have said about the Civil Rights Act, I'll have them voting Democrat for 200 years. So now, the Democratic Party prospers on the votes of the very people it has spent much of its history oppressing. Democrats falsely claim that the Republican Party is the villain, when in reality, it's the failed policies of the Democratic Party that have kept blacks down. Massive government welfare has decimated the black family. Opposition to school choice has kept them trapped in failing schools. Politically correct policing has left black neighborhoods defenseless against violent crime. So when you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party should come to mind? I'm Carol Swain, Professor of Political Science and Law at Vanderbilt University for Prager University.
It's a good take to watch. So is she currently at Vanderbilt University?
She might be. You can see if you go back.
Is that?
Maybe the reconstruction that goes with that.
Correct.
Was that her? No. It said if you scroll down, it says the date of the video. So she may still be. I'm not sure.
What year did PragerU University start?
We've been around for 11 years. So do you know who Dennis Prager is? So Dennis Prager, he's based in LA and he is a conservative radio host. He's had a show for about 40 years. And he has a very kind of cult following, almost like a Rush Limbaugh type, but he wasn't so combative. He talks about theology, he's written many Bible commentaries, but he's been a conservative thought leader for a long time, and about 11 years ago, his producer came to him and said, you have all these great ideas, because he really saw, like, he went to Columbia University in I think the 70s, and he even saw it then, the underlying communism that he was being taught. And so his big thing has been warning people of socialism that is just disguised as, as ideologies. So his producer went to him and said, you have all these great ideas, but we need, young people to hear them. So enter the 5-minute video. They take kind of a big concept, and we condense it, make it entertaining, put a good moderator and some facts, and then put it on social media and just blast it out, and that's how PragerU was born. And all of our content is evergreen, it stays relevant, one of our most viral videos is about the Electoral College, which is kind of a boring topic, but evidently it's one people don't know anything about, so it has some of the most views. So we're used as a really easy resource to find things, and we take, white papers from the Hoover Institute or the Manhattan Institute, and I don't know the last time I read a white paper. I'm not going to. So we take these big concepts and condense them, and then a lot of time we'll get the researcher who wrote the white paper to be the moderator for the video. So, Victor Davis Hanson, if you know who he is speaking at a gala in Los Angeles in November. We had a Palm Beach fundraiser in March. We're having it again next year, but in last March it was Matt Walsh and Betsy DeVos spoke. So we get some pretty exciting people involved. And Candace Owens, does everyone know Candace Owens? So she actually started, her first show was with PragerU. So one thing PragerU does is we take people and we realize we kind of have to make our own celebrities. So I think Xavier, the stories of us that we watched, in a few years, everyone will know who he is. Because we can't wait for people from Hollywood to come out and say, oh, I'm conservative, or oh, I believe in God, or oh, I believe in America and family values, or they'll be canceled and they won't get any jobs. So we kind of have to make our own leaders. So that's one thing PragerU's figured out too, is sort of entering the arena and making our own cool young personalities.
Yeah. It's like supporting the companies